I need to tell you what happened in that building, not because I want to, but because if I don't get this out, I think my mind will finally give up. What I experienced in those 12 hours changed something fundamental inside me, something I can't ever get back. My name doesn't matter anymore. I was a combat medic with the 3rd Battalion, stationed in a contested zone most people have never heard of. We'd been pushed back for 3 days straight, taking casualties faster than command could replace us. The enemy had better equipment, better positions, and an endless supply of bodies willing to die for whatever cause they believed in. We were scattered, broken, running on adrenaline and the fading hope that reinforcements would arrive before we were all dead. The firefight that separated me from my unit happened so fast I barely processed it. One moment I was crouched behind a demolished wall, trying to stop the bleeding from Corporal Henderson's leg. The next moment the wall exploded inward and everything became noise and dust and screaming. I don't remember running. I don't remember the decision to leave Henderson behind. But I must have made it because when my vision cleared, I was 3 blocks away, alone, with enemy voices echoing from every direction. My gear was shredded, medical supplies scattered, radio smashed. The sun was dropping fast, painting the ruined city in shades of orange and red that looked too much like fire. I needed shelter, somewhere to hide until I could figure out my next move. That's when I saw it, a massive industrial building at the edge of the district. Its walls still mostly intact. The faded lettering on the side read something in the local language I couldn't fully translate, but the symbols were clear enough. It had been a meat processing plant. The front entrance was blocked by debris, but I found a side door hanging off its hinges. The smell hit me before I stepped inside, that distinctive odor of old blood and decay mixed with industrial chemicals. I hesitated at the threshold, every instinct screaming at me to find somewhere else, anywhere else. But I could hear vehicles approaching, the distinctive rumble of enemy patrols. I slipped inside and pulled the door closed behind me. The interior was darker than I expected. My eyes took a moment to adjust, and when they did, I wish they hadn't. The main processing floor stretched out before me, a vast space filled with hanging chains, conveyor systems, and industrial hooks. But it wasn't empty. Bodies hung from the chains, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. My first thought was that I'd stumbled into an enemy execution site. My hand went to my sidearm, the only weapon I had left. But as I crept forward, I realized these weren't fresh kills. The bodies were in various stages of decomposition, some barely recognizable as human. Military uniforms from both sides hung in tatters from the corpses, civilians too. Men, women, a few that might have been teenagers. This place had been used as a dumping ground, a convenient location to dispose of the casualties both armies wanted to hide. I should have left immediately, found another shelter, but the patrol sounds were getting closer, and I'd already wasted precious minutes staring at the horror before me. I moved deeper into the building, past the hanging corpses, looking for a defensible position where I could wait out the night. The administrative offices were on the 2nd floor, accessed by a rusted metal staircase that creaked under my weight. I found a room with a partially intact door and a window that gave me a view of the street below. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. I wedged the door shut with a broken chair and settled into the corner farthest from the window, trying to control my breathing, trying not to think about what was hanging in the darkness below me. The sun finished setting. The building fell into complete darkness except for the weak moonlight filtering through broken skylights. That's when I heard the first sound. It was soft, barely audible over my own heartbeat. A white quaking noise, like joints popping. I told myself it was the building settling, old metal contracting in the cooling night air. But then I heard it again, and again. Multiple sources now coming from the processing floor below. I crept to the office door and opened it just enough to peer down into the darkness. At first I saw nothing, then movement caught my eye. One of the hanging bodies, about 20 feet from my position, was twitching, Just small movements at first, a finger curling, a foot rotating slowly at the ankle. I watched, transfixed with horror, as the twitching spread. The corpse's jaw began to open and close, not randomly but rhythmically, like it was trying to speak or scream. More movement now. Other bodies beginning to shift and twitch on their chains. The sounds multiplied, wet pops and clicks, and the rattle of chains as dead flesh animated with horrible purpose. But this wasn't like the zombie stories I'd heard growing up. There was no coordination, no awareness. Each body moved independently, mechanically, performing the same movements over and over in loops that made my skin crawl. I pulled back into the office and pressed myself against the wall, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Post-mortem muscle contractions, rigor mortis releasing, some kind of gas buildup causing involuntary movements. There had to be a logical explanation, but the movements were too specific, too purposeful, and they were getting more intense. The hours crawled by. I couldn't tear myself away from watching the spectacle below. One body, hanging near the center of the room, was going through elaborate motions. Its arms would rise slowly, hands grasping at nothing, then fall back. Its head would tilt back, mouth opening wide in a silent scream. Then the whole sequence would repeat exactly the same way, over and over. I realized with growing dread that it looked like someone drowning, arms reaching up for air that would never come. Another corpse nearby was different. It would jerk violently, spine arching, limbs flailing in random directions. Then it would go still for exactly 3 seconds before the sequence repeated. The pattern never varied, each movement precise and identical to the last. It looked like someone being electrocuted or having a seizure. I counted 17 different bodies going through distinct movement patterns, some subtle, some grotesque, all repeating endlessly in the darkness. The sounds they made, the wet pops of joints, the rasp of dead flesh against metal chains, the occasional snap of breaking bone, it created a symphony of horror that burrowed into my brain. Around midnight, something changed. The movements became more synchronized, like they were feeding off each other's energy, and I started to feel it, a pressure in the air, like before a thunderstorm. My head began to ache, nausea rolled through my stomach. The room felt too small, too hot, despite the cold night air coming through the broken window. I tried to distract myself. I checked my ammunition, 3 rounds left. I examined my injuries, nothing serious, just cuts and bruises. I thought about my unit, wondering if any of them had survived, but my attention kept getting pulled back to those twitching corpses below. That's when I noticed something that made my blood turn to ice. One of the bodies, hanging closer to the staircase, was wearing the remnants of a combat medic uniform, the same unit insignia I wore, same rank. I couldn't see the face clearly in the darkness, but I could make out enough details to know this person had died badly. The body was missing its left arm completely, and the torso showed signs of massive trauma, ribs exposed, internal organs visible through torn flesh. As I watched, this corpse began its cycle. The right arm would reach across the body toward where the left arm should have been. Fingers would grasp at empty air. The head would turn, looking down at the missing limb. Then the whole body would convulse. A full body spasm that rattled the chains, and repeat. Over and over, the medic was reliving the moment of realizing their arm was gone, trapped in that instant of horror and shock for eternity. I had to look away. I had to force myself to think about something else, but the image was burned into my mind now. I started wondering about the other bodies. What were they reliving? What final moments of agony were they trapped in? The headache got worse, pounding now right behind my eyes. And with it came something else. Flashes of sensation that weren't mine. A burning in my chest, the taste of blood, the feeling of cold metal against skin. They came and went too quickly to fully process, but each flash left me more disoriented. I must have dozed off at some point, exhaustion finally overcoming fear. I jerked awake to find pale dawn light filtering through the windows. The sounds from below had stopped. I crept to the door and looked down at the processing floor. The bodies hung motionless now, as still as corpses should be. In the better light, I could see just how many there were. At least 70, maybe more, in the darker recesses of the building. The sylva, so much death, so many final moments preserved in rotting flesh. It should have horrified me, but I felt something else. Curiosity, a pull toward them that I couldn't explain. I told myself I needed to search the building for supplies, radio equipment, food, anything useful. That's why I descended the stairs, not because I wanted to get closer to the dead. That's the lie I told myself. The morning light didn't make the processing floor any less horrific. Dried blood covered everything, the floor, the walls, the machinery. The smell was overwhelming now. Rotting meat and chemicals, and something else underneath it all. Something older and wronger that I couldn't identify. I moved between the hanging bodies, trying not to look at their faces, focusing on the ground, searching for anything useful. But I could feel them around me. A presence, a weight of accumulated suffering that pressed down from all sides. My boot caught on something, and I stumbled forward, catching myself on the nearest surface. It was one of the bodies. My hand sank into cold, dead flesh, and everything exploded. I wasn't in the processing plant anymore. I was in a trench, artillery screaming overhead, dirt raining down. I couldn't breathe. My chest was crushed, something heavy on top of me. Lungs burning, desperate for air that wouldn't come. Panic, pure animal panic. Darkness closing in, and then I was back, gasping, my hand still pressed against the corpse. I jerked away, stumbling backward. My heart hammered in my chest. What the hell was that? A hallucination? Trauma response? But it had felt so real. The weight in my chest, the taste of dirt in my mouth, the specific quality of that particular terror. I should have run then, should have left the building and taken my chances with the patrols outside. But something held me there, a horrible fascination, a need to understand. I moved to another body. This one was smaller, dressed in civilian clothes. I reached out slowly, carefully, and touched the cold shoulder. Fire. Everything was fire. My skin was burning, peeling away from muscle, the smell of my own flesh cooking. I tried to scream, but my throat was full of smoke and melted tissue. I could see my hands blackened and cracking. Reaching up toward sky, I couldn't see through the flames. The pain was beyond anything I'd ever imagined, beyond what a human mind should be able to process. And then I was back, my hand trembling against the corpse's shoulder. I understood then. This building, this place where so much death had been concentrated, it was storing something. Recording it, the bodies weren't just twitching randomly. They were playing back their final moments, and when I touched them, I experienced what they had experienced. Every sensation, every emotion, every microsecond of their dying. The rational part of my mind screamed at me to stop, to leave, but I couldn't. I was drawn forward by a compulsion I didn't fully understand. Maybe it was guilt. I'd left Henderson behind. I'd survived when so many others hadn't. Maybe I felt like I deserved to experience what they'd gone through. I spent the next hour touching corpse after corpse. Each one showed me a different death, a bullet through the skull, instant darkness but not before a flash of white hot pain, a knife to the gut, The slow horror of feeling your intestines spill out while you're still conscious, drowning, the panic of water filling your lungs. Strangulation, the awful eternity of those final seconds when your brain is screaming for oxygen that will never come. Some deaths were quick, barely a moment of realization before everything ended. Others were slow, agonizing. I experienced a man bleeding out over the course of minutes, feeling himself get colder and weaker, his thoughts fragmenting as his brain lost oxygen. I experienced a woman crushed into rubble, trapped and aware for hours before her body finally gave up. Each death left a mark, not physical, but something deeper. I could feel them accumulating inside me, these final moments. My own body started to react. My hands would twitch, mimicking movements I'd experienced in the visions. My breathing would catch, remembering what it felt like to have lungs full of water or smoke or blood. The sun climbed higher. Midday approached. I'd touched maybe 30 bodies, each one adding to the weight inside me. I felt full, overstuffed with death and dying. But I couldn't stop. There was an addiction to it now. A need to know every story, to carry every final moment. That's when I found him. The body hanging in the darkest corner of the processing floor. Military uniform. Same as mine. Same age, roughly. Same build. In the dim light, he could have been my twin. But his death had been the worst I'd seen yet. His body showed signs of systematic torture, burns, cuts, missing fingers. The work of someone who'd taken their time, who'd enjoyed it. I knew I shouldn't touch this one. Something about it felt different, more dangerous, but I couldn't help myself. I reached out with both hands and grabbed the corpse's cold arms. The pain was indescribable. It wasn't just physical. They'd broken his mind first, broken his sense of self, reduced him to nothing but raw nerve endings and suffering. Hours of it, days maybe, time lost meaning in that place of agony. I felt every cut, every burn, every broken bone. But worse than the physical pain was the psychological torture, the moments of hope when they'd stop, only to start again. The degradation. The stripping away of humanity until nothing was left but an animal that wanted to die but couldn't. When I finally pulled away, I was on my knees, tears streaming down my face, vomit burning my throat. That death had changed something fundamental. It was too much, too intense. It had carved itself into my neural pathways in ways the others hadn't. I tried to stand and found I couldn't. My legs wouldn't support me. They kept twitching, muscles contracting in patterns that weren't mine. I watched in horror as my left hand began to move on its own, fingers curling and uncurling rhythmically. The movement looked familiar. I'd seen it before in one of the corpses. Panic set in. I tried to control my hand to force it to stop, but it wouldn't obey. It just kept going through that same pattern. Curl, extend, curl, extend. Like it was rehearsing something. Other parts of my body started to move. My right foot rotated at the ankle, over and over. My jaw began to clench and unclench. My spine would suddenly arch, forcing me into an uncomfortable position before releasing. None of it hurt. That was almost worse. These movements felt automatic, like my body was acting out a script I hadn't agreed to. I understood what was happening. I'd absorbed too many deaths, touched too many corpses. The building had been recording their final moments, and now I'd become another storage medium. My body was practicing dying, rehearsing all the deaths it experienced. trying to process the overload of final moments crammed into my nervous system. I managed to drag myself to the wall and prop myself up against it. The movements continued. Sometimes my whole body would convulse in a pattern I recognized from one of the corpses. Sometimes it was just a hand or a foot or my head tilting at an unnatural angle. I had no control. I could only watch as my body betrayed me, performing a symphony of death while I remained conscious, trapped inside. The hours passed. Afternoon bled into evening. The involuntary movements never stopped, never even slowed. If anything, they were getting more complex, more coordinated. My body was learning, refining its performance of dying. As darkness fell again, I heard the corpses around me begin to move, their nightly rehearsal starting up, and I realized with absolute horror that I was joining them. My movements were synchronizing with theirs. When the drowned man's corpse reached up toward imaginary air, my arms would begin to rise. When the burned woman's body convulsed, I would feel the echo in my own muscles. I was becoming part of the building's collection, another death to be recorded and replayed for eternity. The night stretched on. I lost track of time, lost in the cycle of involuntary movements and the memories of death that accompanied them. Each time my body went through a particular pattern, I would experience flashes of that death again. The crushing chest, the burning skin, the drowning lungs, over and over, an endless loop of dying while still alive. Somewhere in the darkness of that second night, I felt my sense of self beginning to fragment. It was too much. The human mind isn't built to contain this many deaths. To experience this many final moments, I could feel myself breaking apart, my identity dissolving into the accumulated horror of all those endings. But I didn't die. That would have been a mercy. Instead, I remained conscious, aware, trapped in a body that was no longer entirely my own. A body that now existed to rehearse dying, to practice the final moments of dozens of people who'd met their ends in this awful place. Dawn came eventually. The corpses around me fell still, but I didn't. My body kept moving, kept going through its patterns. The building had taken something from me during that second night. Some essential part of what made me human. I was a recorder now, just like the walls and the air and the blood-soaked floor, a medium for storing death. I don't know how I got out of that building. The next clear memory I have is being found by a patrol from my unit 3 days later. They said I was wandering in the street, covered in filth, my body moving in strange, jerking patterns. They brought me to a field hospital, then a proper hospital, then a psychiatric facility. The doctors can't explain what's wrong with me. All the tests come back normal. Brain scans are clean, no neurological damage, no physical cause for the involuntary movements. They've tried medications, therapy, experimental treatments. Nothing works. I'm writing this during one of my few moments of relative stillness. The movements never completely stop, but sometimes they slow down enough that I can think clearly, can force my hands to cooperate long enough to type or write. Because I need you to understand. I need someone to know what that building is, what it does. The military sealed it off eventually, marked it as contaminated, but I know it's still there. Still recording, still waiting for the next person desperate enough or stupid enough to seek shelter inside. And I need you to know what's happening to me. Every day, the movements get more complex, more coordinated. My body is learning new deaths, creating variations on the ones I experienced. It's not content to just replay what I absorbed. It's evolving, creating new ways to die. I can feel it working even now, my muscles contracting in patterns I don't recognize. my organs shifting in ways that shouldn't be possible. My body is preparing for something. I don't know what, but I'm terrified that I'll find out. The worst part is that I'm still conscious through all of it. Still aware. Still trapped inside this meat puppet that won't stop rehearsing its grand performance. I can't sleep anymore, can't rest, because the movements continue even when I'm exhausted, even when every fiber of my being is screaming for them to stop. Sometimes I wonder if the building is still connected to me somehow. If it's still recording everything I experience. If someday someone else will touch my body and experience what I'm experiencing now. This endless rehearsal. This practice for a death that never quite comes. I've thought about ending it myself, but I'm afraid. Afraid that death won't stop the movements. Afraid that I'll become like those corpses in the processing plant, trapped in an eternal loop of my final moments. Afraid that whatever waits for me on the other side is somehow worse than this. So I continue. I exist. I endure. My body goes through its patterns, while my mind slowly erodes under the weight of all those accumulated deaths. I am a living memorial to suffering, a testament to the building's power, a warning that some places collect more than just bodies. If you're reading this, please understand what I'm trying to tell you. Stay away from abandoned buildings and war zones. Don't seek shelter in places that smell of old death. Don't touch the bodies. Don't touch the adus and and. Just run, because once you start experiencing those final moments, once you open yourself up to that accumulated suffering, you become part of it. The building doesn't let go. The deaths don't fade. They just keep rehearsing over and over, using your body as their stage. And the performance never ends. My left hand just started moving again. The pattern I recognize from the tortured soldier. My fingers are bending at angles that shouldn't be possible. It doesn't hurt. It should, but it doesn't. That's almost worse. The complete disconnect between what my body is doing and what I'm feeling. I can feel it spreading now, up my arm, into my shoulder. Soon my whole body will be going through that particular death again. The worst one, the one that broke something inside me, and I'll be conscious for all of it, just like I've been conscious for every rehearsal, every practice run, every endless repetition of dying. The doctors are coming soon. They'll see the movements getting worse. They'll probably increase my medication again, even though we both know it won't help. Nothing helps. Nothing can help. Because I'm not sick. I'm not having a neurological episode or a psychotic break. I'm exactly what I appear to be. A body that won't stop practicing death. Piloted by a mind that's slowly fragmenting under the weight of too many final moments. I absorbed their deaths. Now I'm living them, over and over. An endless cycle of dying while stubbornly refusing to actually die. The building is still out there, still waiting, still recording, and I'm still connected to it somehow. I can feel it sometimes, late at night when the movements are at their worst. A pull, a reminder, like it's calling me back. Sometimes I think about going back, about returning to that processing floor and hanging myself from one of those chains, about joining the collection permanently. At least then the rehearsal would have an audience. At least then I'd be with others who understand. But I'm too much of a coward. I stay here instead, in this hospital bed, letting my body go through its patterns while nurses watch with worried expressions and doctors make notes they'll never be able to decipher. I am a warning. I am a witness. I am a vessel for death that refuses to claim me. And the rehearsal continues, always continues, will always continue, My body knows the script by heart now. Every death, every final moment, it performs them flawlessly, tirelessly, endlessly. And I remain conscious through it all, trapped in the audience of my own deterioration, watching the show that will never have a final curtain. This is what the building does. This is what it created. Stay away. Please, stay away.